Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video. And in today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2022 Senate elections and my current prediction as of July 6th, 2021. So today we'll be taking a look at the Senate map, making prediction for each and every race and diving into the competitive races and ultimately make a forecast for who, as of right now, I think is favored to maintain or take control of the chamber. So before we get started with this video, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. You can go read my writing. It's all the description. It'd mean a lot to me if you did that. If not, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for being here. But yeah, we're going to hop right into it right now. So we're going to begin by filling out the safe Democratic states. That would be Oregon, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. That puts the Democrats at 44 Senate seats. For the Republicans, they would be at Idaho, Utah. Utah's a bit of an interesting case because Evan McMullin is running there as an independent, and he's going to peel away some Republican voters who would have otherwise voted for Lee. He'll also mostly get like the vast majority of the Democratic vote because the Utah Democrats did endorse McMullin. They'll be funding his campaign. So it's kind of like a proxy thing because the Utah Democrats know that if they ran a candidate, they'd have no chance. And McMullin is going to give them a slightly better chance. It's not very high, but it's non-zero either. So McMullin's probably going to do better than your average Democrat, which is why it could fall into the likely category if we get some good polls for him because he's only down 4 in the most recent poll. But again, I don't really, Utah's a difficult state to pull, and I have a hard time seeing Evan McMullin pulling like that amount of support away from Mike Lee. And so ultimately, I think it's going to be kind of a 60-40 decision, and that would still be a safe margin. The Dakotas are safe for the Republicans. Kansas, both races in Oklahoma. Missouri, if Greitens, I don't think Greitens is going to get the nomination. I think it'll be like Eric Schmidt or something like that. But if he does, it'd probably maybe be likely. But again, I'm not a huge like Missouri's going to be likely person. But yeah, I mean, for now I have it as safe. Like I'll have it as safe until we have evidence that it won't be safe. We have like very, very limited evidence that it will not be safe. Iowa with Grassley is pretty safe. Indiana, Kentucky, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina. So it is, and also Alaska because there are 2 Republicans running. I think Chewbacca is going to beat Murkowski, but you'll have to get back to me later for that one because I really don't know who's going to win that race because we have no data on it. So yeah, that's 45 seats to the GOP, 44 for the Democrats. And now we're going to get to our likely Democratic states. So I only see 2 of these, and they're pretty obvious. That's Washington and Colorado. So usually Washington's a safe state. So you might be thinking, well, Ryan, why do you have Washington not as safe Democratic? And so that's a fair question. I could absolutely see Washington being safe, but I think when we look at the polling data, it's actually been pretty competitive. So the most recent poll came out on June 19th. It was now take this with a grain of salt. It was conducted by Tiffany Smiley's campaign. So it was a Republican internal pollster. She was down 5%. And generally speaking, internal pollsters will show a very favorable result for you. So you want to be ahead in your internal pollster by usually a substantial margin. And Smiley's behind by 5%. So it doesn't really mean she'll win, but it means that this race could be more competitive. And I think, that's a fair sign. We also saw some, this is not a Democratic internal, but it is a Democratic leaning pollster. So it did 3 polls in the June, February, and November. And they all kind of showed a similar decent Murray victory. And so I don't know. To me, that makes me think that the Democrats aren't going to win this race by as much as originally anticipated. But again, it's Washington. It's a state that is very partisan for the Democrats in federal races. So I don't think Murray will win by less than 10%. Colorado too. We don't really. If I recall correctly, I don't think we have any polling in Colorado. But Colorado is the only state where polling actually tends to underestimate. Oh, we do polling actually. Where polling tends to underestimate Democrats. But Bennett up by 13. So O'Dea got the nomination. So he was beating O'Dea by 13 in this poll, and that's the only poll we have. But yeah, so he's beating O'Dea by 13. I think he'll win by a similar amount. Biden won the state by like 12 or something. It was a very, very solid showing for Joe Biden and the Democrats in Colorado. It's trending blue. The Democrats have lost party registration in most states, but they've gained in Colorado for whatever reason, because Colorado is just trending blue to like another level. So I think Michael Bennett will be fine here. Yeah, so next up is our likely Republican states. There are quite a few of these. So Ohio's the first, and like I think that Ohio is like the typical example of a state where the Republicans should be doing a lot better than they are. This isn't to say they're going to lose it. I think they are extremely likely to win this race, but I don't think J.D. Vance is going to outrun Donald Trump by that much. Trump won Ohio by 8. J.D. Vance will probably win by 9 or 10. And so the reason I say that is because, again, like polling in Ohio is usually really bad. The interesting thing about Ohio is that the polls, like I said, they tend to underestimate Republican support pretty significantly, which is why I don't love them. So Biden was within striking distance of Trump, according to the polls in Ohio. He was only down by about a point, and Trump won Ohio by 8%. And if you look at the most recent polls, Trafalgar and Rasmussen are very Republican-leading pollsters. They kind of skewed it. But like when you take out those polls and look at the polling data here, Quinnipiac had Biden up by 5 and 4. Emerson had him by 1. Rasmussen actually had him up by 1 year, which is quite interesting. Quinnipiac had him up by 1. New York Times had him up by 1. So again, it was quite, the polls in Ohio showed a very tight race. It ended up not being that close. I think we're kind of seeing the same thing this time around. Like when you look at the polls in Ohio between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan, the most recent poll had Ryan up by 3 points. Now, again, this was a Democratic internal. Innovation Ohio, again, is a very Democratic-leaning pollster. But like even in non-Democratic-leaning pollsters, Vance only up by 2, Ryan leading by 2, Ryan leading by 1. So the polls are showing like a toss-up-esque race, and I don't really think that's an accurate indication of where we are. Ohio is a right-trending state. J.D. Vance is going to win. Next up will be Florida. Florida's not too interesting. The polls in Florida are really wacky. I really could not care less about what the Florida polls say. Marco Rubio is going to win by 8-10 points, similar to the J.D. Vance margin of victory. He'll do very well in South Florida. I expect him to do better than Trump with Cubans, and Trump did really well with Cubans. And I think he will do better in the suburbs that Trump kind of regressed in. So Rubio will be fine. He'll win re-election easily. Wisconsin's probably the closest out of these races, but again, I don't really think it'll be that close. So Mandela Barnes is likely to be the Democratic nominee. I think I saw a poll with him ahead by 30 points over all the other Democrats. But the Democratic field in Wisconsin is very mediocre. They have Sarah Godlewski, Tom Nelson, Adam Murphy, Alex Lasry, and Mandela Barnes. And Godlewski and Barnes are the only ones who have actually held statewide office. Lasry and Murphy haven't actually held. I don't think elected office. I think Murphy might have, but Lasry is just a billionaire, I believe. And then lastly, Tom Nelson has held countywide office, but I think he underperformed Hillary Clinton in 2016. So it's a very mediocre field of Democrats. I don't really think that any of them are going to be doing particularly well this year. And Mandela Barnes, the hope is that among Democrats is that he can do better in Milwaukee and get turnout up and try to beat Ron Johnson using the new Democratic coalition or whatever. The thing is, Wisconsin is a very rural state. It's a very white state. So Mandela Barnes can do well in Madison and Milwaukee and still lose by a pretty substantial amount, because Biden only won Wisconsin because he got Herculean margins in Dane County, which is where Madison is, while also getting some, not that much, but some support from white and working class voters. And Barnes is going to do worse than Biden with that group. Biden's less popular now than he was in November 2020. And when you look at the way Mandela Barnes is running his campaign, I don't think it's a campaign to get back the Trump voters even. It is a campaign that I think is going to be much more progressive, much more left-wing, which is great if you're running in California or New York or whatever. It's not great if you're running in a state like Wisconsin. So I think Ron Johnson, he's not even that good of an incumbent. He was very beatable a year ago or maybe 2 years ago. If you said, the Democrats are going to be losing to Ron Johnson pretty badly, I'd be like, no, they could beat him. He's not that good. He has bad approval ratings. He's a divisive incumbent. He's very beatable. And I think they kind of fumbled the bag in this race. So yeah. Now, for a lean, those are likely Republican states. You might have actually noticed that North Carolina is not there, which is pretty interesting. We'll talk about that later. For lean Democratic states, I've only got one. It's New Hampshire. New Hampshire, I kind of fluctuate between lean and likely. I personally do not think that New Hampshire is going to be super competitive. There are people who have it as tilt Republican. I think it's kind of a wish cast, because when you look at how New Hampshire's likely to vote. It's going to reflect suburbs nationwide, and the suburbs nationwide are trending to the left, and the Republicans don't have a good candidate here. Like when you look at the polls, like we've got limited polling. Obviously, if Chris Sununu were running in New Hampshire, I really do think this race would be very solid for the Republicans, but it's likely to be Bolduc, maybe Chuck Morse, but again, that would be tough for him to overcome the primary. So working under the assumptions, Bolduc, he's down by 9 in this poll, down by 1 in this poll. It's actually not terrible. And then he was down by 15 in this poll. So not a great polling for Don Bolduc, but yeah, I really do think that he's going to lose this race by 4 or 5%. He'll probably outrun his polls by a bit, but at the same time, you're looking at a state like New Hampshire that is just much more Democratic leaning than other swing states. Now, leaning Republican states, I have got actually I have 3 now. So the first is North Carolina. North Carolina is just, to me, it's very tough. So on the surface, I kind of thought this race would be like pretty solid for the GOP, but like the more I learn, the more optimistic I get for Democrats here. And obviously they're not favored, but when you look at the polling, Trafalgar did a poll, which is this is a Republican pollster. They had Ted Budd only up by 3, and so it's only one poll. Like if Trafalgar still has Ted Budd up by 3 points in October, November, or whatnot, I'll be like, oh, okay, you know what? It's concerning for the Republicans. So, that's fair. And again, I'm not saying that like this is like a terrible poll, but like if we keep seeing more of these, it'll be pretty ominous. Point being, for now, Trafalgar only having up by 3 for the Republicans isn't great. But we also saw a Survey USA poll, and like this is a pretty good polling organization. They had Joy Beasley up by 4%. These other polls, John Locke Foundation, which is a Republican poll, had her up by Ted Budd up by 5 and 2%. So again, the polls are kind of all over the place, but like the most recent 4 polls have all been really good for Sherry Beasley because 3 of them have been Republican pollsters that have showed the race in competitive territory. Then the only nonpartisan pollster had her up by 4 points. So I think like when you're looking at this race, you can make a case for Sherry Beasley. Like if she can get better black turnout in the past, she has like a real chance here. But I really don't think that this race is going to be as competitive as some people think. I got Sherry Beasley losing by about 4 or 5%. So yeah, at the 50th seat for the Republicans, I think, is Pennsylvania. And look, there's been a lot of hype with John Fetterman, and like I get a lot of it. I really think that it's very easy to fall for the hype for John Fetterman. So when you look at the polling, Fetterman's up. We don't have enough polling to make like a chart thingy, but yeah, those recent polls we've had Fetterman up by 9 points from Suffolk. Fabrizio Lee and Associates, which is a more Republican-leaning pollster, they had him up by 6, and then Signal had him up by 4. So, the 3 polls that have had Fetterman versus Oz have, showed a pretty strong lead for John Fetterman. And I think that's so. I could talk a lot about Pennsylvania, and I do it on a podcast, by the way, so go listen to that. But yeah, so Fetterman's problem is that he's running as Democrats think that they can kind of vibe their way back to 2012 levels with working class voters. The thing is, they can't do that. John Fetterman is, I think, propped up by these assumptions about working class white Pennsylvanians that I don't think are actually true. He's like bluntly, he's a tall dude who doesn't dress formally, who kind of just talks the way it is. And I think a lot of people like that. And they think, oh, he can appeal to the working class that voted for Trump both times. And I think that's kind of a tone-deaf expectation among Democrats. Yes, John Fetterman can win. I don't think he's winning the way he's running his campaign. You can disagree with that because he's up. Ryan, he's up in the polls. Looks like he has the momentum, and yeah, like you can make that case. But when you think of where we'll be in October, November, John Fetterman has already lost a primary in 2016. I think his support with black voters in Philadelphia is very, very shaky. I really don't see him getting good turnout from the city of Philadelphia. I don't think he'll do that well in the suburbs. He needs to run a bit more of a more normal Democratic campaign to get the numbers that Biden got in the suburbs, and he's not doing that. He's trying to appeal to a group of voters that I don't think are coming back to him, and that's why I don't think he's favored. You can say, well, the polls, this, but the polls in Pennsylvania are usually pretty bad. They overestimate Democratic support. When you look at what Dr. Oz is doing, Dr. Oz is coming out of like a brutal Republican primary, a 3-way just clown show between him, Kathy Barnett, and David McCormick, and it's just so chaotic, and it was just so divisive, and so of course he's down right now. Like, of course some Republicans haven't come for him yet. Like, I know she has like this like lingering thing where some people think he's a rhino, and I think that to a certain extent that will hurt him. But I just don't see Fetterman getting enough turnout in Philadelphia to combat that, and I don't see him doing well in the suburbs. And I think even if Oz is still unfavorable, which he'll gain, by the way, I think Oz will gain momentum as we get to the campaign more further from that divisive primary. Then yeah, I could absolutely see him doing better. But yeah, so for now, I expect Dr. Oz by 3-4%. I am firmly on the Republicans are favored in Pennsylvania train. I know it's not a popular train to be on right now. I think most people have kind of put this race back in the Democratic column because of Fetterman's momentum, and maybe I'll be proven wrong. And again, the second that I see like compelling evidence to suggest Fetterman's favored, I will put it in the blue column. But for now, I've got it as the Republican. The last state in this column is Arizona. So Arizona is quite the interesting state. So Mark Kelly is a good incumbent. Blake Masters is not a good challenger. The polling has been very, very it's been awful for the Republicans in Arizona. Like there's not a single state where the poll's been worse for the Republicans than Arizona. So when you look at Arizona, I'm surprised they don't have a graph thingy, but Democratic internal had him up by 9. This poll had him up by 8 or 16 over Masters. This poll had him up by 9 over Masters, and then this poll over. I think they did one more. Oh no, they didn't. But okay, they didn't. But yeah, he's up by 9, 16, and 9 over Masters. So the poll's been really bad for Kelly or for Masters this cycle. That being said, I'm putting him favored for the sole purpose of I like math. I think math is a good way to predict elections. It is very hard to build a path to victory for Mark Kelly right now. Arizona in 2020 voted 4% to the right of the country. Okay. That alone is just very compelling evidence for the Republican pickup in Arizona. This is going to be a more Republican-leaning year. In 2020, the generic ballot, or Biden won the popular vote by 4% while winning Arizona by 0.3%. The Republicans right now leading the generic ballot by 1.5%. So again, this is down from where it was before. I think things are getting better for Democrats because they are down by, I think, 2.7 at their worst point. They're down by 2.7 in May. Now they're down by, 1.5. So, there's been a shift to Democrats post-Dobbs ruling. And again, pollsters that we once saw, having Republican leads are now showing Democratic leads. So the Democrats are gaining nationwide. That being said, I do not think that that's enough to save Mark Kelly. I could be proven wrong. It's a competitive race. And, if the polls start to move towards the Democrats at a more fundamental, I think for Kelly to win the national vote, I would have to be D+1, D+2 for me to put him favored. It's just hard for me to see a path for him. It's such a Republican leaning state. It's such a, it's Arizona just to me doesn't it's shifting left and there are signs for Kelly. The polling has been good for him, but at the same time, Arizona would have so let's say the polls are right. National environments are +2. Add that 4 points from Arizona being trending or being 4% to the right of the nation. So that's R+6. How does Kelly make up that 6.1% margin needs to make up? You can throw in left trends. Let's say it's R+4, which is generous. Do you think Masters' candidacy is worth 4%? I think it's worth a point or two, but I don't think he's. The thing with Masters is that he's a bad candidate. He doesn't have those terrible soundbite clips. He might give Kelly one in August or September or October, in an interview or during a debate or whatnot, right? There's still time for Kelly to make this up, but as of right now, I don't see enough voters crossing over for Kelly for him to win. So I've got him losing by just over 2%, which is in the lead column, barely. The very competitive race, don't get me wrong. Kelly is not done by any means, but again, I just don't see him favored right now. The last two states are tilt Democratic states. So the Democrats at 49 seats, Republicans at 51. That's the prediction. So this is a flip from last time. I had the Democrats at 48 last time. I got up at 49 this time. And so I think when you look at this race in Georgia, we'll get to we'll do Nevada first. Nevada, I think I've had Cortez Masto favored for a while. I haven't had her losing since I think December or whatnot. I've been pretty solid on Cortez Masto as a narrow favorite in Nevada. Nevada, it's my argument's basically this, and you can disagree. It's a little more controversial, but in Nevada, Biden won the state by 2.4% without really campaigning there. COVID really depressed Dem turnout in Las Vegas. We had universities closed. Dem turnout in Nevada was just bad in 2020, and the Democrats still won it by a fine margin. Cortez Masto is going to do everything she can, and again, I could be proven wrong. Like if she runs a bad campaign and she starts to just have no energy, I'll move it to the Republican column. But Cortez Masto right now seems to be doing everything that she can to boost Democratic numbers with Hispanics in Las Vegas, to get out the college vote in UNLV, UNR. Nevada has a lot of colleges, obviously, and it's a smaller state population wise, so that helps the Democrats because every vote really counts here in such a competitive race. And Laxalt's a fine candidate, but I think that Dawes being overturned hurts Republicans in the suburbs because Nevada is a very pro-choice state, and that would hurt Republicans in the suburbs. So I think Cortez Masto is the narrow favorite right now. She could absolutely lose, but it's just, to me, the indicators seem to be pointing to a narrow Cortez Masto victory. Georgia, that's our final one. It's a flip from last time. I had Herschel Walker winning barely last time. I've now got Raphael Warnock winning barely this time. So what changed? Well, Herschel Walker is just not a good candidate, and I've been saying that for a while, but it gets worse and worse every single week because he has a new he has apparently 3 kids. I don't even know now, out of wedlock. He has domestic abuse allegations. He allegedly abused, I think, his ex-girlfriend or ex-wife. Sorry, I had to close my window because the birds were screaming, and I was like, hey, I'm trying to record YouTube. Bad birds. Point being, Georgia. So Herschel Walker is a bad candidate. He has multiple scandals I just named on the other end. And the polling has been atrocious for Herschel Walker. When you look at what we're getting here, the average right now points to a narrow Warnock win. And, in Georgia, the poll is actually pretty good. The runoffs, Ossoff and Warnock were narrowly ahead. They narrowly won. In 2020, I think Biden was narrowly down the polls. He narrowly won, but it was only a 0.% difference. So the polls in Georgia have, were pretty good in 2020 and 2021. And when you look at the races in 2021, Democrats did well in Georgia everywhere. So in January in the runoffs, they flipped 2 Senate seats. Duh. But also in November, no one really paid attention to this, but there were local elections in Georgia. And I think, Democrats flipped councilships, mayoral races, despite the fact that Republicans did well in Virginia and New Jersey. So I think when you look at that, when you take into account the Democrats that did good things in 2021 in November, not McAuliffe, not Murphy. Murphy underperformed by a lot. It was really the Georgia Democrats. And so they've proven to me at this point that they can do enough, even in Republican-leaning environments, to win. So I think when you look at what we're seeing here in the polls, Warnock's narrowly up. In this, it's funny because in Walker's own internal, he's literally tied with Warnock. So that's a really bad sign for him. And when you look at the other polls, this is a Democratic-leaning pollster, Warnock by 4. But, this poll, Quinnipiac, which is pretty good actually, showed an even race for the governorship between Abrams and Kemp. And in the Senate race, they actually had Warnock up by 10. So if Warnock's really outrunning Abrams by 10 points, that's a very good sign for him. So, again, when you look at these pollsters, when you look at what they're saying, I'll ostracize this because it's a terrible pollster. But, the other pollsters are showing at worst for Warnock in a Republican internal, he's even. At best, he's up by 10. So, again, I don't think it'll be a 10-point margin of victory for Raphael Warnock, but I do think he's the narrow favorite for now. So, that's it for this video, guys. Prediction: the Republicans net 1 seat, but again, this would be kind of a mediocre performance for them considering the circumstances. If they'd run better candidates, I think they'd have Arizona and Pennsylvania locked down. They'd be winning in Georgia, and they would be, I think Laxalt's a fun candidate. Nevada, I think, was kind of out of their control. We don't know who won Nevada, though. It's still a very close race. But, thanks for watching this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tell me what you think in the comment section below, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.